Members, it's 2 o'clock, the appointed time for the start of this meeting. Thank you once again for your participation in this committee and for your attendance today. It's a fairly full agenda, and already I would like to ask your indulgence. You will note that there is an item of exclusion at point 14. That item relates to items 8 and 9, and what I would like to do, if it's okay with yourselves, is move item 8, item 9 to just before that point in time, because then it's fresh in your mind what has come up from the monitoring officer team. Are we happy with that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I was going to raise this possibly as a point of order. I mean, and it's relating to 8 and 9. And while the majority of this agenda is routine and purely procedural, I question that 8 and 9 actually fall into that category, in that the committee has been presented with decisions around standard investigations. And just given that all other standards cases heading our way have been cancelled until the Council's proportionality issue has been set, should these not have been deferred until that time? Surely the same rule should apply for all cases. And if this Council wants to show it's carrying out its standards duties correctly, then personally I think that's the only option. I think it would be highly inappropriate and cast doubt if these items were heard today while the committee operates technically in limbo. Thank you.
Can I ask Neil to comment, and then I'll come to you, Councillor.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair. The 2 reports which give the conclusions of the investigating officer's investigation, there is actually no recommendation there. It's for information only. So, I mean, obviously I will explain when we get to those items, but in accordance with our process, where no breaches are found as a result of the investigation by the investigating officer, there is a procedure within our adopted procedure whereby the monitoring officer can dispose of the matter, so that it goes. If the monitoring officer is satisfied with the investigation, then no further action can be taken, and that's a decision for the monitoring officer, not for the Standards Committee. So that is the reason why those 2 matters are before you today. And if there was a decision to make, then it might have been a different matter. I appreciate, but it is really just for information to inform the Standards Committee of how those matters have already been disposed of. I hope that makes it clear, Chair.
Would you like to come back?
Yeah, it does make it clear, Neil, thank you. And it was sort of the opinion I had to start with. I just think this leads us open to some sort of... it questions this committee, because why are these 2 reports coming forward? 2, high-profile ones, basically, with 2 cabinet members, and the other ones have been, were agreed that they would be deferred until the committee was set.
Yes. Just to follow on, Chair, I think I can help Councillor Dunn. I mean, we were at a stage in the process where we were in a position to report those 2 matters to Standards Committee ordinarily. And the same can't be said for the other contentious matters, which we will come on to later in the agenda under the hearing procedure. So there are other matters where we haven't, for one reason or other, been able to agree availability to actually have a hearing. But there didn't seem to be to us any reason why these couldn't. They've got to come at some point. It's only right that Standards Committee are aware of these matters, and they have been concluded. So, we didn't really see any reason to delay bringing them to Standards Committee any further. I mean, that's our position.
Further, Councillor.
No, thank you. Take that aboard, but can I have it noted that I've got deep concerns about this and why they've come at this time?
I think those concerns are noted, Councillor, and we will take that into account. Okay. And certainly I'm hopeful that future process will not be disrupted, if you like, in terms of proportionality, because that matter will be resolved. But thank you for the comments and thank you for highlighting that. Councillor.
Right, thank you, Chair. It's very kind of you. And I totally agree with my colleague because, you know, what went to agree on page 18, the new terms of reference with regard to the makeup of this particular committee, instead of 9, it will be 8. So therefore, surely, Councillor Dunn's correct in saying that we should be dealing with those matters later on when the proportionality is indeed well represented. And I feel that another question I would like to ask, so, I mean, was, could I probably ask, as a new person to this committee, who was the investigating officer and how were they appointed? Because was it done in due process? Because obviously we don't know, because Liz and I are both new councillors onto this committee. So we just want to know, you know, how was the investigating officer? Were there 2 separate ones? Was it one person who dealt with both cases? And, you know, and I would just like to ask that question for clarification, please.
You come back on that, Neil.
I can, Chair. I mean, it might be that when we get to that item, it might be the ideal time to go into this. I mean, obviously, Councillor Dunn has mentioned that you know, she thinks that it maybe shouldn't be here today. You know, questions of deferment are quite you know, proper to be considered at that point. That's a matter for the committee. But I think when we get to that item, I might not be able to answer all of that question because I don't have the information before me now. But I can certainly inform members of who the investigating officer was. In fact, I think that should be evident from the Part 2 papers. But Chair, yes, I think probably that's the right time in the agenda to consider these matters.
You'll bring that back in. You'll bring that back in for us.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, did I hear correctly that these didn't have to be brought back to this committee? It could have been, the monitoring officer could have just, because there's been no case to answer, the monitoring officer could have just, you know, signed off, if you like. But is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
Chair, can I suggest that we leave this until the proper time in the agenda? I'm just conscious I don't think we've had apologies for absence yet or disclosures of interest. So
no, my apologies, because I should have controlled that better. We were looking to change the items within the agenda and allow the point of order to roll on beyond where it should have gone. So apologies for that, members. You are happy to move those points to just before, so we'll end that item. If I can return to the agenda, could we have apologies for absence, please?
Yes, apologies from Councillors Bridget and Wallace.
Thank you. All members are aware that you have to make the necessary disclosures. Does anybody have any disclosure that they're aware of that may impact or affect on the work of the committee today? Thank you. If we could move on to item 3, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. This is a technical item. There are no matters arising from these notes. They're simply for accuracy. So, if I could ask whether or not, in terms of accuracy, members accept that this is a true record of the previous meeting.
Accepted, Chair.
Is that unanimous? Thank you. If we can move on to item 4, which is a matter that has been at previous meetings, and that is in relation to the appointment of parish councillors or parish and town councillors and their representation on the Standards Committee. Neil, if you'd like to take over.
yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, the matter was before the previous meeting of the Standards Committee on the 14th of October, and the purpose of this report is just to update members on the progress and where we are at with regards to the appointment of the parish council members. As members will be aware, the terms of reference and membership of this committee approved by council include 3 parish council members I can inform members that today the recruitment process has been that we're on to our second round of advertisements, and we've gone through NALC to do this. We've received 2 applications, but 1 application received late. And the closing date was the 30th of November 2001, and one application was received after this date, which technically would exclude them. However, you'll see from the recommendations in the report that officers have thought that it might be a sensible conclusion to let you consider whether that should be accepted out of time, Chair. I think it was mentioned at the last meeting, Chair, that we would approach the other authorities in the region to see what their experience has been with regards to recruitment of parish council representatives. I think it's fair to say, Chair, that the responses we've had, it's not been entirely relevant. The responses, I think it's Sunderland and Gateshead have just got 1 parish council, so they just nominate that parish council just nominates its own representative. So that hasn't really been very helpful. We haven't really had much more of a response. North Tyneside don't have parish councils, for example. So we are where we are, Chair, and you'll see from the recommendations that the recommendation is to accept the 3rd application, albeit out of time. But if not, that you authorise officers to go back and conduct one more round of advertisements to see if we can get any more interest. Just on reflection, Chair, it might be an idea to authorise officers to conduct that advertisement process if in the eventuality there are any hiccups in the process. For example, one of the applicants no longer is interested. It's just a thought that isn't in the papers, but one which members might want to consider, Chair. But the recommendations are before you.
Thank you. Councillor.
Thank you, Joe. I was just going to say that, if we're lucky enough to get 3 applicants and the others, I think we should just go ahead, whether it was late or not. I might have been a valid excuse why they haven't been able to get that application form in for the due date, but I think if we can get 3, we're lucky. And obviously, as the Standards Committee move on, and the process is going to take longer. If we've got to re-advertise, then they're going to be probably missing half of a year.
It's a good point, well made, Councillor. Thank you. Anything you need to come back on, Neil, on that one? Oh, sorry, Councillor Flux.
Just on that basis, and to expedite things, I'm going to propose we therefore go to the procedure to interview stage straight away, and I think we'd agreed that that interview panel will be me, you and Councillor Wallace, and if we're all happy with that, can I propose that we do that then?
Members, is that unanimously agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the input on that. Thank you.
Can I take it, Chair, that the suggestion of Councillor Grimshaw, sorry, that if there are any hiccups or problems in the process, we can go back to advertisement.
Yeah. You're happy with that, Councillor Flux? Yeah. As part of your proposal. Thank you. The next item is in relation to the appointment of additional independent persons. And I think... Oh, Councillor.
I was going to come in straight away on this, and sorry, I might have jumped the gun here, but to agree the composition of an interview panel, may I suggest that we go for the same interview panel as the 3 of us, myself, yourself and Councillor Wallace, if the committee are happy with that?
Would that be agreeable to the committee? Well, that clears up a part of it anyway. So thank you very much for that. Thank you for that, Councillor Flux.
Chair, if that's a formal move, and can we just get a second?
Yeah. It's been formally moved and seconded by Councillor Sessler. Thank you, members. Do you want to then talk to the rest of the...
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will. Well, Chair, the purpose of this report is to start the process really for the appointment of 2 additional independent persons. Under the Localism Act 2011, the Council must appoint at least 1 independent person to support the work of the Standards Committee and the investigation of complaints. With a comparison of other local authorities, they typically have more than 1 independent person, and it's felt that given the size of the authority and the number of standards matters that are currently in process, that it would be appropriate for more independent persons, and the suggestion is for 2 extra independent persons, Chair. The first stage of this is to agree an application pack, which is at Appendix A, and then advertise the role with the application pack and proceed to interviews. We'll need an interview panel, and it was 3 last time, but I see Councillor Fox has moved that particular matter already, so that's fine. There are also comments from Councillors Hill and Dickinson that you should have, and these, Chair, result from the matter being reported to full council, where Councillors Hill and Councillor Dickinson requested sight of the information pack. So, Chair, the recommendations are to agree the pack and agree an interview panel, and that's the report before you.
We've agreed the panel, so that's sorted.
Yes, so that's
so in relation to the interview pack, if members have had an opportunity to view that pack, does anybody have any particular comments or concerns that they'd like to raise in relation to the application pack?
Actually, Chair, can I add 1 or 2 other points just on the application pack? Because I did notice that there is the odd typo, Chair, on page 22, quite evident from the top, and it'll need to be updated in respect of the correct composition of the Standards Committee. I believe it mentions 8 members, where it's 9 currently. And also, it's just an observation really, the Code of Conduct, the Members' Code of Conduct that is within the pack is obviously the current one. There's an item on the agenda today about maybe adopting a new Code of Conduct. So if there is any change then before the pack goes out, then that will obviously be made.
Are members happy that with the addendum of any additional changes required?
Could I?
Councillor.
Thank you. Sorry, it's very difficult to hear with the noise, but I'm just looking at the additional information we received with regard to the last page, with regard to that it was indicated that I had not seen the process. We write further to that paragraph there, and BC is you wish to see recruitment process for the independent persons, and that you could not support the delegation to the MO without sight of it. How can we defer this? Will we find out a little bit more about this? Because I'm a little bit concerned about the content of this, whether it's all going to be the decision of the monitoring officer to be able to recruit these independent persons. Because I think it should be a panel that perhaps recruits them. I mean, that's how I'm picking up just reading as I've received it, Neil.
Can I just clarify?
It's on the last page. The last page was just recruitment of additional independent persons to Standard Committee. So, I mean, we've just received this, and I'm a little bit perturbed. On the last page, is that the back page, and it's sent from the monitoring officer to Scott Dickinson. Recruitment of additional independent persons, and it's just for clarification because I'm not quite sure what we're being asked to do here.
Point of order, Chair. Can we be told which page we're referring to? Because we don't
Yes,
understand.
it's the very last
sheet
page
that
of the
we've been
additional sheet we've been
this
given.
afternoon, and it is the back page.
Back page, and it's the first paragraph. I'm not
Yes,
quite.
yes, Chair, I think.
I'm not quite sure of what how we're supposed to read this. If you don't mind me saying so.
That's fine, Chair. I can address the question.
If you wouldn't mind.
And first and foremost, just in response to one of the points that Councillor Grimshaw made, I hope you can hear me, Councillor Grimshaw. The noise has just calmed down for a little bit. The monitoring officer doesn't appoint the independent person. The panel that's just, that I think is in the process of being appointed. The 3 members that have just been suggested, they will be the interviewing panel. Now, on the previous occasion, we have looked at what happened on the previous occasion. The monitoring officer at that time was present, but it's not clear whether they had any input or whether they were just there to advise, basically, on process. I see the independent person is shaking her head. Mrs. Milner. Right, okay, well, thank you. That
and I
clarifies
can't
the process.
clarify because he was there purely in an advisory capacity. The decision-making was undertaken by the actual panel, and he wasn't actually part of it.
Well, thank you for the clarification. You, when you just get these papers put in front of you and you're looking at it, you kind of think, well, you know, we weren't on the standards in. It's just wondering just for clarification more than anything else, Chair.
Absolutely, Councillor. That's why we're here. You've got to ask questions when questions need to be asked.
Thank you very much for the clarification.
And Chair, I think just another question. Yes, the application pack, in effect, is the application process that should contain everything. So members should have everything before them today. And it's just a simple process of application and then interview by the interview panel. Thank you, Chair.
Are you happy with that response, or would you like to come back?
No, that's fine.
That's fine.
So, excuse me, Chair. Sorry, hi. I'm in the link. Good afternoon, everyone. There's one other thing that I think that the committee should know about is that the interview panel makes a recommendation to full council to appoint the independent people, not the monitoring officer or the interview panel. You do the process and then you make a recommendation for full council, and it's for the full council to approve your recommendation.
Does that give you greater assurance, Councillor? Thank you. Thank you. That being the case, we have a recommendation before us in relation to the composition of the panel. The only thing I think we need to resolve is, are we happy with the rest of the process? If so, could I have a show in relation to that, or does anybody else have anything they want to bring to the table?
Sorry, Ed, can you just confirm for me where the typo error was? Did you say page 22, Neil?
It might have been page 22 of the application pack. I'll just check.
I think Councillor Dickinson highlighted
There's another one highlighted on page... Yeah.
It might be the same one as Councillor
No,
Dickinson.
I don't think it is. Page 31.
Yes, that was page 22 of the application pack, so it's the same one that we're referring to, Councillor Dunn.
Well, that's fine, because it is slightly confusing with numbers, so I can appreciate where you came from on that. Councillor.
Yes, also it's on page 31 at the top. Just person is spelt wrong. Independent person. Top.
With the addition of the corrected English, are we happy to accept this as a process to go forward to recruit our new independent persons? Great. Unanimously. Thank you very much. Next item is the Model Code of Conduct. Neil, would you speak to that again, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, again, Chair, members will be familiar with the issue at hand here, as the matter has been reported to Standards Committee on a few previous occasions. And the purpose of the report is to update members on progress. And we just started. The Localism Act, of course, states that the Council must adopt a code of conduct for members. And just to remind members of the history of the Model Codes of Conduct, the Local Government Association, following recommendations from the Committee on Standards in Public Life, produced a Model Code, and this is the code that's been under consideration. In October 2021, the Standards Committee the matter was brought before Standards Committee, and the comments taken from members. If members recall, there were comments on trying to assess what the regional approach was. I think that was addressed at the previous committee. And also there was a discussion on the social media aspect. I'll come back to the social media aspect just a little bit later, Chair. In the report, this sets out, members will see within the appendices, at Appendix A comparison table showing the differences between the model code of conduct and our current code of conduct. And at Appendix B, a draft of what we suggest should be the adopted model code of conduct for members, and that has got members will see deletions there where appropriate from the LGA model code of conduct, and additions. I was going to say in green, Chair, but I'm not sure that they show through.
Yeah, they're not particularly highlightable, but they're in a very light grey.
Yes, and these are additions from our current code of conduct and mainly relate to where our current code of conduct deals with the various protocols that the council has in its current code of conduct, which we think is quite useful. And certainly the training we have, it was highlighted as a matter which we might want to retain within any new model code of conduct. So, Chair, officers are at a position really where we feel that we can put a new model code of conduct before members, and the options there, as you'll see from the recommendations, are really to adopt it in full or in part, or not adopt the model code of conduct at this stage. But it is a matter for members, Chair, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Yeah, members, this is entirely a process for yourselves to determine. The code is before you as could be presented to full council, and the options are, as Neil said, adopt it in its entirety as is, adopt part of the code, although I struggle to see how the separation would take place, or not to adopt the code at all at this stage. So I'm happy to open the floor up. Councillor.
Yeah, Neil, did you say you're coming back to the social media aspect of this code, did you?
Sorry, Chair, I did say that, yes.
Yes, you
within the, I was going to mention, Chair, within the guidance produced, to go with the model code of conduct, there is a link to LGA guidance on social media. I mean, I can certainly circulate that, Chair, and I mean, currently within the model code of conduct, social media is dealt with. I believe it may be at point 8, but not as specifically as within the guidance that the LGA have on their website. However, it's felt that it would be probably a little bit excessive to recreate that in its entirety within the code. However, that is something that members might want to consider.
Yeah, well, the code deals with things like bullying, and there's a mention somewhere. I had it marked and I can't find the bloody thing now, which refers to.
You've got a green mark on the bottom page, Councillor.
No, I've got marks all over the place. Just give me 2 seconds. If not, I can remember most of it anyway. Well, I can't find it. Oh, is it? Yeah, here it is. Basically, at the top of page 40, it references social media as mentioned within the model code, but does not have a specific provision devoted to it. It is, however, mentioned within the bullying provision. Now, of course, social media is a great art form for bullying. I think everybody will agree with that. But it's not just bullying that it deals with, especially in related to council business. Spreading of malicious rules and rumours by, well, we're dealing with members, so we'll talk about members. Obviously, it's spread by anybody, could be spread by the public, could be spread by anything. But spread by members is not necessarily bullying, but it is it's malicious misinformation. And yet we don't have, well, I can't identify. It may be here somewhere. That doesn't seem to come in here.
Yes, Chair. I think what we mean is that if there is any behaviour that exhibits itself through social media, it's already covered by the code. So as the example of bullying is a good example. But the LGA guidance doesn't, for example, it also advises members on how to deal with that type of behaviour being directed at themselves. So it's not just in terms of members' behaviour, although it is of great assistance.
Yeah, I realise it's not just members' behaviour, but if you're thinking about bullying, it tends to be a target of a individual, a singular person, whereas malicious misinformation could be spread to cover groups or full council. Could be anything.
Is your
sent by an individual, possibly, but to cover, it's not targeted at an individual necessarily.
Yes, there are. I mean, I take on board your example, Councillor. But I mean, the behaviour such as that could come within various strands of the code of conduct.
So you think it's covered? That's basically all I want to clarify.
Bringing the council into disrepute could be one of them. Obviously, you would make a forensic examination of the code of conduct if you ever had any of those complaints.
Councillor, just to come back on that, I think it is covered, but I think the point that you make is a valid one, and I think certainly I will be working with the monitoring officer team to look at ways in which we can highlight the issues of social media and perhaps come up with not necessarily a code, but guidance in relation to the use of social media and the damage that it may cause, if that finds a solution to your causes for concern. You happy with that, Neil?
I am, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any comments, concerns?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm just wondering, because on page 45, the 7 principles of public life, also known as the Nolan Principles, do not specifically form part of the Code of Conduct, but are set out in full Annex 1 for information. So I'm just wondering if the social media part could also be put there for information too, if that's, with the LGA that have something.
It's a matter for members, Chair, but I think maybe a hyperlink to it would be more appropriate. The way it's set out on the LGA website is it's a series of drop-down menus, and it's not really something you can cut and paste into a document like this, I don't think. And yeah, I would hesitate, Chair. I think it's right for members to be referred to it, but I really wouldn't want to replicate what's on the LGA website within it. I think, as the point's been made before, social media is a forum for particular types of behaviour, to where they can exist. It doesn't really, I suppose, matter where the behaviour in question exists in whatever way, whether it's verbal, in the written form. It can all be a breach of the members' code of conduct. Social media is just a place that can happen, so the code does already cover it. But it's certainly something that members should be referred to, Chair. And if members have got any suggestion as to how to do that, then we can certainly take that on board.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, personally, I really think we do need a code of conduct. I don't think not having one is an option, and I think we need a clearer one than what we've had. The clearer you make it, the easier it is to enforce or to bring up. So I don't think that not having it or not agreeing to one is an option. Just as a point of clarification, and for myself, I think the two things that sort of confuse people is, where is it now, on page 59 or 23 of 26, whichever way you want to look at it, the land and property bit. I know that a lot of people don't put their home address in there, and yet it is land within the Northumberland County. So is that right, that if, certainly mine's in, and I think everybody else's will be in, that the home address is land within the county? And my second question, and just for clarification, is, I don't know where it is now, but it's the charitable organisations. Does this include the Freemasons? Other registrable interests?
Chair, can I suggest that I take away Councillor Dunn's questions and do a formal response? It's a little bit off topic, but I do appreciate the questions, and certainly the first question is one that's come up on a few occasions. So it's something that I'd like to do a proper formal response on, Chair, and that can be circulated to all members of Standards Committee, if that's okay with you.
Councillor Flux and then Ben.
Yeah, all I was going to say was that it's my view that we go for option A, adopt the code in its entirety. But I was going to ask if this could go on the website in the same way that the Constitution is on the website, so that people can have easy access to it. Because I suspect what will happen is, as time goes by, this committee might amend it or might do something different, and it's basically always going to be a live document. And as the Constitution is a live document, it's not worth having printed out, because by the time you printed it out and you keep it in on your back shelf, full council might have changed the Constitution since, and people refer to things which are out of date and such like. So I was just going to ask if it could be recorded in that same way.
Is that something we can look into, Neil? Or would you be able to give an answer now?
I can give an answer now. So, can I just come back, Chair, on a couple of things through you on some of the questions that have been asked? Can I just clarify, and I apologise because I can't see you all clearly, and Councillor asked about the LGA social media code, whether we could actually make reference to it in our code of conduct. Neil's absolutely correct that we can't, but we can put the hyperlink in. And I think having the hyperlink for a lot of codes that we actually will adhere to, because we've got the code of conduct for member and officer protocol. There's also the LGA code, civility in public life. The intention is to add as many hyperlinks as we can to this code, so members have a lot of guidance and clarity. We will be looking at a toolkit in the monitoring officers team, which will provide you with some FAQs and some further guidance. And we've also got on your agenda for this afternoon the last item about your work plan. And Chair's already mentioned that some further training on social training, some further guidance on social media is one of the things that we want to concentrate on, so we can add that to the work plan. So there are many codes and many guidances. There's also the Lawyers and Local Government Code and guidance, particularly on social media, which we can add a link to. So part of the team, what we want to give you and members of Northumberland and the parish councillors as much information as possible to carry out your duties and your roles. And the second question with regard to the disclosure of pecuniary interests in Table 1, which is the statutory disclosable DPIs, the issue of land and property, you're absolutely right, Councillor, that it is by law, you have to put down where you live. However, due to a number of fear of reprisals and councillors being targeted and councillors fearing sometimes of being part of hate mail, it has been agreed that on the website, the ones that we publish, and we have to publish the DPIs for transparency, some councillors' names and addresses have been withheld. I know that when you're nominated, you have your names and addresses on your electoral forms, but this has been common practice and best practice for monitoring officers for some time. However, the hard copy will always contain your name and your details and all the DPIs and your land where you hold property. And that hard copy we have to hold by law, which is held in, I believe, by Democratic Services at the moment. But so if you did want to access it, you could access the hard copy. So I hope that answers that question. And Councillor Flux, with regard to it being put on the website as a live document, by law, the Constitution has to have certain parts of standing orders, and one of those is that it has to have contained within a code of conduct for members. Now, if we take take it out and separate it and update it as a separate issue, it doesn't form part of the Constitution unless, when we update the Constitution, we get approval from full council via the Constitution Working Group, the officers' advisory, the members' advisory Constitution Working Group. Forgive me, I'm still trying to grapple with a lot of the local codes and local practices we have in NCC. We could do that, but we always will have to make sure it forms part of the code, or part of the Constitution. And if you update it, Councillor Bucks, you have to report that, and through the advisory Constitution Working Group, and then a recommendation to full council. So you will still need to go through those hoops, but you can have it separated. But if you make any changes, you will have to go through that process because it forms part of the Constitution.
Apologies for the interruption, Councillor, but I think it was pertinent to answers to questions that had been raised and needed to be addressed. So, sorry, Councillor.
Oh, sorry, I thought Liz was coming back.
No, I was just going to say thank you, but I only sort of heard at least a third of it, I think.
Okay. Right, thank you, Chair. Well, I would like to see a little bit more work done on page 42, with the code gives examples of the amounts of treating others with respect, but also how to deal with disrespectful behaviour from others. I think there could be a little bit more work done around that, to make us have a little bit more clarity on that, because we know it's happened and continues to happen. And that links in with item number 3, definitions of bullying and harassment. I do think there needs a little bit more work done around that to make it a little bit more, have a little bit more clarity on that. And also page 45, I'm looking at general principles of councillor conduct, and I'm looking at, and you go down the paragraph before application of the code of conduct. I ensure that public resources are used prudently and in accordance with my local authority's requirements and in the public interest. Could we perhaps elaborate a little bit more on that as well, please?
Yes, Chair. I'm just highlighting that the part of the model code that you refer to, Councillor Grimshaw. Yes, certainly. Just a general observation, Chair, just in terms of comparing the current code of conduct to the proposed model code of conduct. I think the model code that's before you today certainly is better than, and it's got a lot more information and examples in it of particular types of behaviour than what we've had previously, certainly. And the guidance is also a lot better in that respect. So it certainly, as officers, it does certainly assist us in determining, you know, whether certain types of information would be, you know, a breach of the code in that respect. But I think that's all I can say, Chair. It's a matter for the committee whether the committee wants officers to go away and do more work in certain respects, and you know, we can always bring a further report back in the future. I think Councillor Flux, and just remind me what your motion was, Councillor.
So, part A, you've got the code in its entirety. Is my motion.
Okay, I'm not sure we had a second, Chair.
I don't think we did, but I've got Councillor Stewart wants to speak.
Two at the same time, if you don't mind. Yes, I'll second that. But the caveat in relation to the LGA advice, that's just been copied from Ashfield District Council. It's not the best, and they refer specifically to Twitter, and we know there's far more mediums out there now. So I think that needs to be reviewed for us in this county as well. So I'm quite happy for it to go on as a hyperlink, but we can't cover everything. So I think, as Councillor Sesford highlighted there before, bringing the council into disrepute covers a whole multitude of things. But I think there should be a lot of work done on the social media side. It's going to get bigger.
Thank you for that. I think what's apparent is that we have to have a code of conduct, and we have to strike a balance between what we put into that code of conduct before we start cluttering up that code of conduct with a lot of additional information. So I think there is an element of activity that we need to undertake whereby additional guidance is going to be offered to go alongside the code of conduct rather than cluttering up the code of conduct in itself. And that being the case, it would be up to yourselves whether or not you adopt as the proposal is, and then leave it to officers in conjunction with, well, whoever's necessary, including myself, to come up with some documentation that may well allay some of the fears that you have and give good guidance, good counsel to the elected members of Northumberland County Council. Councillor Sessman.
If we perceive this document to be a live document, then it basically means that over time there's little tweaks and additions to it. That's why it's a live document. So, I mean, that seems pretty standard. So, if the members over here have anything else to add to it, they put it forward, and then it'll be discussed and added to if agreed. I mean, is that not the normal way?
It would.
Otherwise, we could keep hanging this back forever and ever, and then somebody else comes up with another point. Well, actually, I wouldn't mind this being done.
It would be the normal process, but I think there are two avenues of approach. One is we take the opportunity whilst we're here to nail down as much as we can that is going to be in the code. But the other thing is to establish that not everything can and will go into the code, and that there will be areas where members will get advice as to how to operate the code in another form and in another format. I trust you understand what I'm trying to get at here.
I understand, but sometimes saying I think we need more work on this, I mean, without specifics, it's just not happening, is it? You know, if say we have specifics on a particular area that we think needs adding, that's fine. But if it's just a generalisation saying I don't think that's good enough, then why is it not good enough, and what needs to be added? I think that's what we need to know.
You want to come back?
Yeah, just a small point, Chair. I mean, obviously, it's been mentioned already that we've put at agenda item 11, future plan of work, and it is correct that the code, you know, it is a document that is constantly under review, and if at any point in the future there are any suggestions for improvements, then we should review that. But it might be an item that's you know, we'll get onto that item 11, Chair, but it might be something that could be discussed at that point when considering what the committee want to be the future plan of work.
I'm as happy with that as a way forward for the time being. So we're back to the original proposal that we accept the Code of Conduct in its full form. That's been brought to our attention by Councillor Flux and seconded by Councillor Stewart. Do we have unanimity or do we need a vote? Great. Thank you. Item 7.
Sorry to interrupt again. There is I am trying to Lindsay and Neil, to let them know, Chair, to speak, and I've had my hand up. There is one other thing, Chair, if you will recall during briefing I mentioned that what we need to do is agree this in principle, because as I said, locally we have the non-advisory Constitution Working Group, and any changes that are proposed to the Constitution go via that group for their views and comments before full council is able to accept the recommendation from this committee to adopt this code in its entirety. So therefore, it's got. I'm not quite sure whether it should have gone there first or come here first, you know, and that's something we, as a team, are trying to work through with the members of that group. But it does need to go to them for their comments and their views before full council is able to adopt this, which is your recommendation A in the report. So I just wanted you to know that it's got one other hoop to go through.
Is that noted and accepted, members? Thank you, Suki.
No problem.
Item 7, Code of Conduct, the progress report. Neil?
Yes, Chair. This is the usual standard.
Sorry, before you start, that is a document that was circulated to you today. So you've just got that sort of hot off the press? Yeah.
That's an updated version.
It's an updated version.
Yes. Because there have been one or two changes, really just reflecting the recent matters that have been added. for the 2022 complaints. And yes, Chair, this is just the usual standard reporting to the Standards Committee. The figures and basic information relating to member codes of conduct complaints. And I just remind members that we do include in the table any years where there are outstanding complaints. So that's why the full list of 2020 complaints are included and ongoing to 2021 and now 2022. It's because there are still outstanding matters to be resolved from the 2020 complaints, which hopefully will be resolved soon. But yeah, that's the report before you, and you have the register there, and it's really for members' information.
It is an information report per se, but do we have any comments that any member would like to make that Neil can address? Or we have to accept it? Happy to accept?
Yeah, I know.
Oh, Councillor.
I'm just wondering what the differences are between the one we had in our pack and the one that we've got now, just because I haven't had time to really go through it and have a look.
Sorry, Chair, yes, I can explain. It's really, Chair, it's the... I just updated it over the last few days with the complaints that have been submitted to us since, I think it's NCC 0522. I'll just get my original register, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, the likelihood is it's 0522 onwards, because this report was scheduled for the 27th of January, because this is a rescheduled meeting from that date.
Yes, Chair. My copy ends at 1821, but the version, sorry, Chair, the version on my computer went up to around, I think it was 05 or 04 2022. So those last 4 or 5 complaints have been added, and 1921 as well. So those are the main changes, Chair. They're the only changes.
I'll come back to my original point before the question. Anybody, any comment or concern or anything they wish to raise in relation to the item? Fine. Thank you for that. Right, we've previously agreed to move items 8 and 9, which means we are now on to item 10, Code of Conduct and the hearing procedure.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the purpose of the report is to inform and update members in respect of the current hearing procedure for Code of Conduct complaints. And this is with a view to upcoming matters which will be reported to Standards Committee, and which will require hearings. There have been 2 matters that two reports earlier that you've seen where it's been reported to you that there's been no breach following investigations. We have a number of matters which where the investigating officer has found breaches, there is findings, and they need to be reported to Standards Committee. They'll need hearings. And so as a first step, bringing the hearings procedure to Standards Committee and just reminding members of that and taking any questions, beginning the preparatory processes for the hearings is, officers thought that would be beneficial to members. So, Chair, what I propose to do, I've set it out in the report, and we've appended the current procedure to the report. I can go through it if members wish. If members wish me not to do that, I can also do that. It is in the papers, but it follows I believe, Chair, it was 2016 or 2017, the previous time that 2016, Chair, that the previous hearing that the Standards Committee had, the respective Code of Conduct complaints, and this is the procedure that was followed. There may be one or two other considerations, just given the possible complexity of the matters. And I could just pick one or two of those out from the procedure, Chair, or I could go through and give members a little whistle-stop.
I think
talk through the procedure if you wish.
Yeah, I think there's probably three things. Whistle-stop, by all means. Pick out highlights, by all means. But I think what may be useful is if you can advise what's actually different between the two hearing processes.
Sure, Chair. I'll go through. Yes, I'll go through the procedure, Chair. I think in terms of differences, there aren't, really major differences as such, Chair. But we can get onto that. Okay, so I think it's worth starting out, Chair, with just an explanation that, of course, some of the principles underpinning the hearing procedure, rules of natural justice and fairness, and the idea of having the procedure in the first place is to follow a fair and just procedure and make sure that all parties have sufficient time and scope within the procedure to present their cases. So, first of all, Chair, as you would expect, introductions, and that will be yourself explaining briefly the process that we followed that day. One thing I would pick out as a highlight, Chair, is in terms of preliminary procedures. So I think I would say here, Chair, that there may be, we will need to prepare for these hearings, and there is within the procedure for actually investigating complaints, there is a pre-hearing process which is set out, which is where the monitoring officer with the chair can seek to identify issues and facts which aren't an issue with the subject member of the complaint. It's really just to concentrate and on what the issues are, to try and make the hearing more efficient, and agree facts and agree things like witnesses, make sure all of the witnesses are relevant. So if matters can't be agreed at that stage, and if they are, they can be presented at the start of the hearing to members, just to try and streamline the process at hearing. But if those can't be agreed, then there is a slot at the beginning of the hearing procedure where these matters can be aired. So, just one thing there, Chair, which you may have picked up on, just from the fact that the investigation reports for the two previous matters are in part 2. There might be an issue about whether the hearings are to be held in public or not, depending on what information may come to light, what data. There may be personal data involved, there might be sensitive information. So those are the sorts of things that will be addressed, and could be addressed also at the preliminary stage of the hearing. But once that is done, Chair, we move on to findings of fact. So if all facts are agreed, then that's fine, of course, but often we will find that they're not, and we're not expecting all facts to be agreed. So in that situation, the investigating officer would present his report, and that would be with any evidence that they wish to bring. And there will also be an opportunity for the committee and for the subject member to ask questions of the investigating officer. After that, Chair, the member who is subject to the Code of Conduct complaint then has the opportunity to make their representations, bring any evidence, and any questions can be asked of them, Chair. At that stage, Chair, the procedure states that the Standards Committee will deliberate in private with the independent person on the questions of fact and find what facts they they have found are correct, Chair. After that, Chair, the subject member will make representations on why those facts do not amount to a breach of the code. So although certain facts are found, it might be that those facts either do or don't constitute a breach of the code. There might be an explanation for them, and that's the next part of the process. So the investigating officer will have an opportunity to give their views, and the member will have the final comments, in effect, a summing up on the matter on whether there has been a breach of the code or not. The Standards Committee will then deliberate in private again, and then when a conclusion has been reached on whether there has been a breach of the code, we'll announce that in public. The process then moves on to whether sanctions will be imposed. In your papers, you'll see a list within the procedure, a list of possible sanctions that can be imposed. And representations can be made on those points. And the Standards Committee will have the assistance again of the independent person when considering and deciding upon which sanctions may be appropriate, if any. So, Chair, that is in essence the procedure. One point I would say, it mentions within the procedure that at any stage the Standards Committee can adjourn to ask the monitoring officer to get any further information or undertake any further investigation on matters. Not a full investigation, of course, but just on any points that come up. So, Chair, that's the procedure, and that is what we intend to follow. But it is, I think, in terms of points to highlight, it's not a change as such, but I think a lot more concentration around the initial stages to try and streamline and make the hearing as smooth as possible will be undertaken.
Thanks, Neil. Any questions? It is an important element of our business, so Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Neil, thanks very much. You have explained it really well and clear. It's quite a simple process there as well. It follows other courts, you can call that. There are a couple of points I would like to raise, but I prefer to do that after we've discussed 8 and 9 today, which I think are quite relevant to this. I don't want to raise it at this time.
So be it. So be it. Any member, any further comment, information? No? Anything you want to add, Neil? No?
No, Chair.
Karen? Anything from an independent person point of view? Thank you. I can never see if Suki's got her hand up or not, so I don't know if she has.
No, nothing to add, other than what we will do is make sure if there's any updates that we need to do this following your discussions on items 8 and 9, we'll make sure for minute purposes we get that down as close as possible. Because, as Neil said, this is an update of your 2016 process that you agreed as a committee. And again, you know, there has to be flexibility in this for the chair to be able to use their discretion when it comes to managing hearings of where there has been an investigation and that investigation has found a breach of the Code of Conduct.
Thank you, Suki. Thank you, members. If we're all finished with that particular item, if we move on to item 11, future plan of work. And already, as members, you've highlighted a number of areas that we may well want to consider. I'm sure Neil's taken them on board. Would you like to take on from here, Neil?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't prepared a report as such. The item was just really on the agenda for members to express any ideas and consider what items you would like officers to consider or produce a report on in the future, or any continuous work streams. One item that I did want to raise, I think it's within the minutes within your papers. On the last occasion, we did discuss about the investigation procedure. So this is the procedure for when officers receive a complaint about members' conduct, we have a certain process to go through. There are certain aspects of it that we think would benefit from review and updating. And certainly in terms of what information we provide to the Standards Committee. So just as a suggestion, Chair, that might be something that could go on the future plan of work to review in the future. But certainly any other areas we would be willing to take away and consider.
Is there a particular mechanism for bringing that to your attention from members?
Well, either today, Chair, or just through yourself, I would suggest.
Thank you. Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, that did come up at our last meeting. When someone is accused of something, it takes such a long time, and it can be very stressful on somebody when they're accused of something. I think it can take up to a year, can't it? I mean, I think that is such a long time to be hanging over somebody, all the stress involved. So yes, if we can do anything to speed up the process, that would be beneficial to members.
I think it's a point well made. We would look to try and expedite things as quickly as possible. We have been criticised previously for perceived inaction. However, a lot of the situations we face are extremely complicated. There is a lot of discussion, argument, investigation that needs to be done. You do have occasions where people are not necessarily as cooperative as we would like them to be, and that can hold things up. But I think it is a point well made, Councillor, and I'm sure we'll endeavour, whatever our processes are in the future, to try and make sure that things are speeded up, but speeded up in a proper fashion so that nothing is missed. Anything to add, Ian?
No, Chair. I was just going to suggest that other than the matter that I've mentioned, if members, might be an idea, Chair, if members have any ideas on future plans of work after we've left the meeting today, then those are fed through yourself, Chair, and then they can be sent on to ourselves and we can discuss again at the next Standards Committee meeting.
Yeah, I think that's sound. We'll form a mechanic by which you can access me directly, and then we can take that up from there, and I can bring that to the table for future planning. Does anybody have any, because you've already come up with a couple of good ideas, are there any more thoughts as we sit currently about direction you'd like us to take or areas you'd like us to cover? No? Thank you. Are you done with that, Neil?
Yes.
I have sorry, Sugi.
Sorry, I'm going to have to try a different way of trying to get hold of you.
It's my eyesight, Sugi. I cannot see that little yellow hand in the top corner that I've just noticed.
Yeah, I'm just going to lower it now. Can I suggest one for through you, Chair, to the committee? Is that you received your report of the on the complaints that we've had, parish council complaints, and we just get this table report. And would the committee, would you benefit from having something that is a trend graph or something to show you the types of complaints that we are getting through and monitoring those? And then, for instance, I've heard a lot of, a lot of conversation from the committee about bullying, definitions of, dispensations. We can actually then see what the trends are and then focus our training for members to be able to kind of be given some more guidance on those types, and the public to get the assurance that we are actually learning from the types of complaints that are coming through, and we are trying to grapple with those and tackle those. So rather than just getting the table, we do some kind of trends analysis for you of the complaints. Again, Chair, that is a suggestion, and if Standards Committee would like that through you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think that's an excellent suggestion. And then as Suki could see the trend and what forms the objections, etc., is taking.
I think that would be unanimously agreed amongst the members that would be a good way forward, and I'm sure we can build that in, Neil.
Certainly, Chair.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So just to reiterate, we'll form a mechanic by which you can make direct contact with myself, and then you can bring forward any ideas that we might have in relation to how we develop the plan of work for the future. So thank you for that, members. I have not received any urgent business. Does anybody have anything they need to bring to the table with urgency? No? Thank you. I'm not sure about the date of the next meeting, because my understanding was that Thursday the 17th of February was a pencilled meeting, and it was just checking availability rather than actual meeting. Is that right?
That's correct, Chair, yeah.
Sorry, Councillor.
We have in our diaries all members' training day on at that time on child and adult sexual exploitation awareness training at 2 p.m. on 17th of February, same time.
Right, I think it was just a sort of penciled in one. We were trying to establish what dates people might be available. So I think this has been put in erroneously.
Okay.
I think things have moved on since the agenda was produced.
Since the agenda. So my apologies.
I thought there was actually two different things. I didn't realise it was coming from you.
My apologies for that. Are you happy that you are advised of the next date rather than us determine one to date? Or can we determine one to date?
Was there not one towards the end of February agreed?
Yes, there is. 28th. Yes, sorry. 28th of February. Yes.
Again, Chair, that's pencilled in, but it's still in the diary if we need it. So,
that's pencilled.
Well, it's under consideration, Chair, as to what we might use it for. Maybe not a full meeting, because we normally have these meetings. Is it once every?
The next meeting, normal meeting,
the next
will be April.
usual. Yes,
I
Chair.
don't have the date.
14.
So they don't meet. We don't meet that often. So it would be April, but we do have a penciled-in date for the 28th, and well, the officers are considering what we could possibly use that for, Chair, particularly in terms of upcoming hearings. But it might be we need to inform you of that at some later date.
Right. So,
Chair, if I can suggest, I think it might be useful to have that meeting, given what might be voted through at full council. We might have a different membership of this committee. There will certainly be, even if there's not large-scale change, there will certainly be people who've never been aren't current members on this committee.
So for my purposes, that relates to proportionality.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Or indeed, for that matter, for members who haven't attended.
That being the case, are you happy with the 28th as a meeting date? Because it should have resolved some of the issues in relation to proportionality, and we can develop what the shape of the body will be. And as Neil says, there may be a number of issues that need to be brought up in relation to future activity in terms of potential hearings. So are you all, as a group, happy to maintain the 28th as a meeting date?
Yeah.
You're happy with that? You got any problem with that, Neil? Is there an issue with that?
No, Chair, no.
Excellent. Suki, can I ask the same question of you? Is there an issue from yourself, or are you happy?
No, Chair. Happy to have it as a date setting to meet the new members. My only concern would be that the full council is the 23rd of February, and it's at that meeting that you identify if there's a change in your membership. And Leslie, I think that won't allow us enough time to be able to publish the papers. Is that correct?
That's correct. The papers will already have been published
and
sent out the previous week.
So it's not going to alleviate the concerns of some members of having the proportionality confirmed, because the papers will need to be circulated before the 23rd is the date that you're going to have it. So, but we'll, can we keep monitoring it and leave it in, because it might be that we have some shorter items of business for that date, and there may not be much on the agenda, and it would be quite nice for the new members perhaps to meet and look at the work plan or something perhaps. But the next scheduled meeting is April, but we haven't got the date for April yet, which is your full committee. So I'm asking permission, Chair, to say, can we revisit and keep you informed of that as committee members.
Well, before we come to that, Councillor Flux, did you have?
Well, I think that's possibly more sensible than what I was going to suggest, because I was going to suggest that you use your discretion to invite new members of the committee to sit informally within that meeting. But it might be more sensible what the monitoring officer has suggested, that we don't meet on that date, we meet on a date which will allay members' concerns about proportionality and the right people being invited to the meeting.
How do members feel about that?
I'm a bit confused, to be perfectly honest. I mean, we've got this Monday in the diary, which, you know, was penciled in as a full day, in theory, possibly. I'm just wondering what was going to be that important to take that space up, and now we're just sort of waving it by. What was actually planned for that Monday?
Shall I answer? Go on, Neil.
Neil,
do you want? Shall I answer it, or do you want to answer it?
You can answer, Sugi.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I apologise. It was whichever councillor asked that. I can't see it. I can see the far corner, but just about. The provisional dates were penciled in, the 17th and the 23rd. They were provisional dates penciled in to actually hear some standards committee hearings. We have got some finished reports that have been carried out by an investigator, an independent investigator, and they have concluded that there has been a breach of the Code of Conduct. And since we penciled in those dates to ask about availability, we have been told that some members, the subject members, are not available for that date. But also at the same time, through the group leaders, it was raised the issue of proportionality, that it was felt to be unfair to have those hearings of such controversial, and I think somebody mentioned high-profile cabinet members, to be heard by members of this committee whilst there was still some debate about the proportionality and the size of this committee. And as I said, in any event, people weren't available for the 17th, so that came out. We penciled in the 28th as a full day because there is one matter which has been concluded, which possibly may take you a day, and we were just seeking availability. However, as I said previously, that's not going to help alleviate your concerns when it comes to proportionality, because the papers will need to be issued before the full council meeting meets on the 23rd. So, Chair, my suggestion is that, through you, we'll keep you posted, and, we still have the April committee, but if we kind of see, once we have confirmed proportionality and the new membership of this group, we can actually try and firm up some dates to hear those hearings. And again, Councillor, there may be a day or maybe half a day. You have agreed today to revise the procedure, and you've agreed that procedure, and I understand there may be some comments in respect to that procedure when you move into part 2, and we'll take those away as well. That was the reason. I hope that clarifies the position.
Does that clarify? Thank you.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
So could I just check? Sorry, Chair, but we're through before. So we don't need to pencil the full date in now. We can just perhaps sit as a normal, say 2 o'clock or something.
I would just cancel it entirely until such time as you're notified.
Right. I just thought if there was other issues that Suki had suggested, that maybe just reports, etc. But we're just cancelling the whole lot now. Brilliant. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Any further comments from anybody on the floor? Brilliant. That's fine. That's that sorted. Can I move back to item 8? Neil?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to inform the Standards Committee of the conclusion of an investigation by the investigating officer into a complaint under the Members' Code of Conduct and the subsequent disposal of that complaint. The report sets out members will see that the report sets out the general allegations at paragraph 2 of the report. Members.
No,
No?
no, we're not into that part just yet.
No, we're not in part.
No, not quite into part 2 yet, Councillor.
Back to 8 and 9, yes.
Yeah, 8 and 9, which were in the public domain. And then the next item will be exclusions.
Yes, Chair. I'm in members' hands as to how much detail you want me to present, but the facts of the allegations are set out at paragraph 2, and the investigating officer's findings are set out at paragraph 4. And the findings in summary, Chair, are that as a result of the investigation, the member was not found to have breached the member's code of conduct in any respect. There's been no breaches found. Now, Chair, in those circumstances, under the procedure that we have in terms of the investigation of complaints, the adopted procedure states that if the monitoring officer is satisfied as to the sufficiency of the investigation, then the monitoring officer can determine that no further action will be taken. And that is what happens, Chair. The investigation report was reviewed and it was found to be sufficient, and all members, Councillor Riddle and the complainants, have been informed that no further action will be taken on this matter. And in the interest of really natural justice and the public interest, Chair, we've reported the matter to members today for information. But there is no decision to make, Chair. It is just for information.
What discussion and review will happen in the closed session?
Well, Chair, that might be sensible, but I mean, it is just for information. I can move on to the second report, Councillor Wearmouth's report. Unless any members have any comments to make.
Remembering at this stage, we're looking at these items as an item of information, and that there will be a part 2, where there may be further discussion in relation to these pieces of information. Councillor.
Thanks. Just sort of generally, the bit in paragraph 4, second bullet point down, where it's regarded that the interest in the land transaction was de minimis. Can you just clarify why that is acceptable in the code of conduct, or where it says in the code of conduct that de minimis is acceptable? Should everything not be declared?
I would have to check the report, Chair. I'm not sure whether it was a question of declaration. Again, perhaps we can pick that up in part 2. Part 2, Chair, should explain to members, is just so that the investigation report can be shown to members. And that is all the report does in part.
That's fine. I think that just has a bearing on the actual code of conduct that we're discussing before. You know, whether everything should be declared as an interest and whether there is such a thing as de minimis.
Yes, Chair. I think the interest was declared, but it's whether there was a breach of that in the particular circumstances of that case. There was a very particular set of circumstances in respect of that matter, Chair, but certainly, Chair, we can take a little bit of time to look at that.
And I think the other issue, Councillor, is when we do engage in the debate, hopefully there will be elements of learning and elements of how we look at what we do and what we have in place. So, you know, every day is a school day. You all learn. Do we have any further comment or question? And we can move on from that matter of information. Thank you, members. And if we are on to agenda item 9, please, Neil.
Again, Chair, the purpose of the report is to inform members of the conclusion of an investigation into an alleged breach of the Members' Code of Conduct by Councillor Wearmouth and the subsequent disposal of that investigation. You will see at paragraphs 2 and 4, the allegations, the general allegations, I should say, Chair, are set out, and the findings of the investigating officer in summary are also set out. No breaches were found by the investigating officer, and as previously stated, Chair, that the monitoring officer, if satisfied that the matter has been investigated sufficiently, can dispose of the matter and by way of no further action, and that is what's happened in this case, Chair, and all parties have been informed of that. Again, there is the investigator's report is appended in part 2 of the agenda. It does contain quite a lot of personal data and sensitive matters, which is why it's in part 2. But that is the report, Chair. The matter has been disposed of, and it is before members for information.
Given that it is a matter of information, given that there will be further debate with the exclusion of press and public, are we happy to accept the information report? Thank you, members.
Sorry, Chair.
Oh.
I'm happy to accept it on the condition that the remarks that are put forward at the beginning of the meeting are recorded. I do think this whole thing should have been deferred. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I agree with what you're saying there. Can we bring it into the part 2 element, please? Because I recall what it was that you did say. Members, thank you very much for all your efforts in relation to the public element of our meeting. If you could just...
Oh, Chair, we need a standard motion to move into part 2.
Can I propose that, Chair?
Seconded.
Yeah.
By
Thank you.
So,
Sorry.